So I had a little bit of an exchange on Twitter with someone who eventually, I don't get into back and forths with people usually on social media, because I find it's often a waste of time. People have their positions and it doesn't really matter what you say. 99% of the time they just stick to their position. So, and also people get trolly and all kinds of things. So I tend to avoid it, but I decided this person I know on Twitter who's quite measured and intelligent was saying some stuff about these vaccines, the vaccines, and how he didn't trust them, how he doesn't trust medication in general, because, you know, I said to him, well, you know, he was talking about the possibility of, you know, side effects from the vaccine, you know, long-term side effects, like this stuff that Max Blumenthal has been putting out, which is very poor journalism, if you could call it journalism at all. Max Blumenthal putting out about the temporary menstrual disruptions, which are temporary, and you know, he's basically, it looks like he's, you know, sort of trying to find as many problems with having vaccines and all of this because he doesn't want to have them himself, that he doesn't want to wear a mask, that he's afraid of the vaccine passports. Yes, I can understand why anybody would be afraid of vaccine passports. I think they're a problem, and I think it's another way of controlling people. It's another way of taking away rights of people of color and black people and all of that, and Muslims, preventing people from coming into the country, preventing them from getting jobs, preventing them from this and that. I can understand why people are worried about vaccine passports, but that doesn't mean that there's something that means that we should then sow distrust in a vaccine because we don't want vaccine passports and we don't want to, or we just have problems with authority and don't want to wear masks and don't want to take vaccines because we're told to. Whatever the reason for people not wanting to take vaccines, you know, if it's something that is not related to, you know, so I can understand people being concerned about long-term side effects, even though mRNA vaccines have been in progress in production for 20 years or so. But, you know, to sort of intentionally sow distrust in the vaccines and stuff because somebody has an issue with either authority or with concern about vaccine passports is a problem to me, because there's a lot of people in the global south can't get vaccines and they want vaccines. You know, there are a lot of people who are going to suffer and die the more people kick back on masks and push back on having vaccines. They're either going to die themselves or somebody in their family is going to die. And I find it interesting if, say, these people who are pushing back so badly and sowing distrust about taking vaccines and wearing masks, if somebody died close to them, would they just shut up? They may not retract what they've been saying, but would then it be because it's hit them personally, then they are okay with it? It shouldn't have to be that way. And so, you know, it's not like I just, you know, just wantonly, without any sort of thought, blindly take a vaccine because somebody tells me to take it. You know, I think about these things and I look into it and I weigh the considerations of that. I weigh the consequences of that. I weigh the consequences for community if I don't take it, and I weigh the consequences of my own health and people around me. And I look at, you know, what's happening in ICUs around the world, intensive care units, and a lot of people are dying that are unvaxxed. Most people that are in ICU with COVID are people that are unvaccinated. That seems to be a fact. So if that's the case, then that means that to some extent vaccines work. Are they working on the variants? No. Do they cause the variants? No. Or they might be working to some degree on the variants, but do they cause the variants? No. Mutations arise naturally. It's something that viruses are very clever at doing, is mutating. They find a way of continuing on living. They find new hosts. They find new way of infecting hosts. Mutations are normal with viruses. Vaccines don't cause those mutations. And people are also putting out that idea, Max Blumenthal is putting out that idea, that vaccines cause mutations. This is something, apart from that it's a natural thing, that the strongest mutations survive. But the other thing is that if people are not protected against these this particular virus, then there are going to be mutations that happen in the population due to the fact that there are people that don't that don't have some sort of protection against that virus. So it's a naturally occurring thing, the mutations, but it's also that people are just continuing on and not refusing to get vaccines, refusing to wear masks. And I honestly, I find it kind of appalling that if some people have not been saying anything at all for the last year and a half, almost a year and a half. And because now they feel like that's enough, I've had enough of this now, I've had enough of the lockdowns, I've had enough of wearing masks, I've had enough of all the fuss about it, now I'm going to start complaining about it. And I feel like there's some of that going on with people that are pushing against vaccines, that are trying to find any excuse, like this menstrual disruptions that Max Blumenthal has been talking about is been widely, you only have to search online and there's stacks of stuff on it. It's not some fucking secret that he's sort of making out as if it's all hush-hush, and that if any woman brings it up, if they suggest that they're having menstrual disruptions after a vaccine, that somehow then they're demeaned and stuff. I don't think that's the case. And I feel like he's making problems where there is none. It's not a secret. And it's unfortunate if there's some menstrual disruption, but you know what's really unfortunate is when people don't have any choice about what's going on around them and they die, like in the global south, they don't have a fucking vaccine. That's fucking unfortunate, and they fucking die by the hundreds of thousands, like what happened in India. So yes, menstrual disruption, if it's temporary, yes, that's unfortunate. It's not even what you'd call an adverse event, according to these two doctors that Max Blumenthal never interviewed. He interviewed an adjunct professor of economics about a vaccine and about COVID. What kind of journalism is that? So he didn't interview the two women, the two doctors that were doing the research. He got the professor, adjunct professor of economics, to poo-poo them in an article, but didn't really interview them, right? And those particular professors take it seriously. Those particular doctors that are researching that, the 140,000 women, of the millions and millions and millions of women who've had the vaccine that didn't have adverse effects like that, they're interviewing them and they're looking into it. And there's lots of articles about it. So, you know, this person who is, and Max seems to be making it now a sort of a real thing that he talks about it any chance he gets. And I'm sorry, but I feel like there's a certain amount of problems with authority with this. I have problems with authority too, in that I'm being ruled by governments that do not have my best interests at heart, that are invading other countries and just trying to destroy countries that do try to do things for their people, like Bolivia and Venezuela, and those kinds of countries, socialist-leaning countries, because capitalist U.S. empire hates any country that is socialist-leaning or communist, and they have done for over a century. And they've been trying to destroy any countries that lean that way, right? But I have a problem with governments too. I just don't take things at face value. I look at things, particularly the more you know about how corrupt governments are and how really it's all about pleasing their corporate overlords and the capitalist class. And that's what all these wars are about. But, you know, like I also care about community too. And I had the choice with I'm just speaking personally now, I had the choice, and I was concerned about, you know, because they came up with this vaccine fairly quickly, but I also know that mRNA vaccines have been worked on for quite some time. And, you know, I know a biologist who's explained this to me. Dee Dee knows a lot about this sort of thing too. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, the choice at this point is possibly getting, because of my age, I don't have any real background health issues, but because of my age, and because it's a severe disease anyway, and it's affecting all age groups now, even children. Children and babies are in hospital now, in ICU, right? It's affecting all age groups, so it's not even people over a certain age. But I thought, okay, well, I could get severe disease and maybe recover. If I don't recover, I end up in ICU and I'll probably die, because by that stage, once you're intubated, it's a fair likelihood that you'll probably die. Most people probably die after being intubated because they've got all these clots forming. It's not a flu like some COVIDiots say. It's not just the flu. It is something where you develop clotting issues in your brain and in your abdomen, and that's what ends up killing people, in your lungs, etc. And so you can have strokes and all sorts of things. Children are having long-haul COVID symptoms now. Long-haul COVID symptoms, which means neurological issues and stuff. So I have this choice before me of, possibly possibly ending up in ICU and dying, or getting long-haul COVID and having neurological issues. And, you can still get the disease, of course, even if you have the vaccine, but you get a lesser form of it, and you're unlikely to end up in ICU. But I had that choice, or get a vaccine, which I know the mRNA has been around for about 20 years, and I've heard information about that from Didi and other sources. And I thought, well, it seems fairly clear to me what I need to do. Do I concern myself about possible down the track some long-term issue from a vaccine that's a new one? Of course. But like any sort of medication that's out there, you can see these ads on US television where they'll have a list as long as your arm of possible side effects and complications from any medication. So it's sort of like every medicine has a possible complication. That's why it's better, if we try and keep healthy so we don't have to take these chemicals. But I mean, some things are beyond our control, like this particular virus. And there'll be more and more of those because of the way we are mismanaging the world, the way we are living in the world with the animal agriculture, which is crazy, and knocking down Amazon rainforests, which have viruses in them, and all sorts of things like that. There's zoonotic diseases. This is a zoonotic disease, what's happening now. And that is because we use animals. We exploit animals, and it's happening all the time. And in super industrialized farms, and that includes free range and all of that, in quotes, free range. Superbugs are being developed all the time because they give them millions and millions of pounds of antibiotics prophylactically to prevent, because of the stress they put on these animals, right? So there's all these superbugs, more and more of them happening, that are antibiotic resistant. There will be more and more viruses and disease because of population increase and all of that. What happens in populations when they're densely packed in and all that kind of thing. So, we're creating this sort of soup of poor health with populations because of capitalism, because we're causing so much social, economic disparities, social inequality and all that kind of thing. We're causing, through lack of health care, like in the United States, Medicare for all, they won't give it to the population even in a pandemic. All that kind of thing. There's so many factors. But, oftentimes, capitalism is at the core, and of course, people just not wanting to stop doing certain behaviors because they just want to. They don't want to, basically. But anyway, it makes me sad when I see people who are otherwise intelligent people who are freaking out now because it's just gone on too long. That's underneath it all. I'm sorry to say that, particularly if that particular person I was having an interaction with on Twitter. I feel like, suddenly now, it's been going on now for a year and a half, and people, because they are feeling frightened about vaccine passports, or they don't want to take a vaccine, or they don't want to wear a mask. Suddenly now, they're kicking back and throwing a tanty like a child, and trying to find anything to sow distrust in vaccines that are actually helping people from ending up dying in ICU, and also they're helping actually fuel this already well-placed mistrust in the government by black people, because the government has been testing on black people. It's been documented for decades, testing syphilis virus out on black people, giving them syphilis without them even knowing, all sorts of things. So they have a well-earned mistrust of the government, right? But then you get white people who just are tired of everything, right? They're over it. Or maybe they're worried about vaccine passport. That's a valid concern. But I think there's a lot of, this, I just don't want to do it anymore. I want to be able to go out to my favorite restaurants, and I don't want the government telling me what to do anymore. I don't want businesses telling me what to do anymore, and all this sort of thing. People that have got these kind of some minor, like not the vaccine passport, but other things, these minor concerns or problems with authority, sort of sowing distrust in a population which has already got valid concerns like black people. I find that really abhorrent and disgusting and racist to do that, to assist in that distrust when black people are dying at a rate 3 times more than the general population, and probably because one thing is because of poverty and poor healthcare because of poverty and because capitalism, right? And then because they've got low vitamin D levels, and yes, that's science-backed, that low vitamin D levels are more prominent in the black community because of their high melanin levels in their skin, which makes it more difficult to get in vitamin D. But there's a worldwide global vitamin D deficiency. There is, even for people that get enough sun, like a person I know who spent plenty of time in the sun had dangerously low vitamin D levels. It's not something that's just you don't get enough sun and that's why you have low D. It's really just a thing, and people should supplement every day with vitamin D. I take vegan vitamin D and my levels are fine. And that makes you less susceptible. There's all sorts of serious illnesses one can get if one has low vitamin D levels. And I've done a couple of videos about that. So do check that out, and check out nutritionfacts.org, which does studies on vitamin D deficiency. Very simple, easy to understand videos on that. So black people people with high levels of melanin in their skin are more susceptible to the serious illnesses of COVID and dying of COVID, and that's a fact. And also getting other diseases like diabetes and cancer. So when you have those two factors of mistrust in the government, a valid mistrust in the government with black people, and then high probability of getting serious disease, serious COVID, and ending up in ICU or dying, and then some white people who are just fed up of having to be told what to do, and they don't feel like wearing masks anymore, and they don't feel like this and that, sowing distrust and helping that community feel even more distrustful and avoiding the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. I find that just appalling. I'm sorry, I do. It's just white privilege again and again, isn't it? And yes, you can have concerns about vaccine passports and their ability to exclude certain groups, people of color, black people, Muslims, etc., or exclude people that are poor, not being able to go here and there, not being able to go into this place and that place, or flying or whatever. Yes, there's total valid concerns. The government uses any disaster to create, to cause, crackdown on society and take away liberties, etc. They do it every single time. They did it with 9/11. They do it ongoing. They use anything. So vaccine passports are a problem in general. But you can have two things happening, or more than two things that are real at the same time. COVID is real. The vaccines, it is proven that they actually stop people from getting severe disease. They don't stop them from getting disease, period, but they stop them from getting severe disease and ending up in ICU and dying. And then most people that are unvaccinated end up in ICU. If they end up in ICU, they're usually the ones that end up in ICU, and many of them die. These are all factors. And yes, these vaccines are to some degree new, and can they cause side effects? They do cause temporary side effects. Can they cause long-term side effects? Who's to know? And that is something that people have to make a personal choice, a choice about. I don't think that people should be forced to have a vaccine. I feel like incentives are probably better. I don't think it's good to force anybody to do that sort of thing. But I think incentives are better, and also, it's a lot of these. I'm sorry to say this, but the fourth estate, which is mostly just corporate media, and a lot of it's Murdoch press. Rupert Murdoch and Sky News here is constantly putting out stuff about, constantly fear-mongering about COVID, or about vaccines, about people of color, bigoted stuff, hateful stuff. They have a part to play in all of this sort of drama now, where people are having marches against wearing masks, and marches against, this and that, and QAnon and all of that. There's a lot, the culture in the US where a lot of this comes from is a culture of great distrust in the government, And why wouldn't you? It's appalling, that particular government, though. Whoever's in power, they're appalling, and I don't blame anybody for distrusting that government. It's also that there's a high level of people that haven't had proper education. There's a high level of people that have poor health care, and so you've got in some parts, a poorly educated public, and a public that feels like they've been abandoned by the government and don't trust the government in a sort of a right-wing way. And then you've got people who don't trust the government because they can see what they're doing overseas and also in their own country, and capitalism and all that sort of thing. You've got all these people all together in one country, and where one side is sort of hating the other side. People with too many guns, like there's a gun for every person in the country. There's insane sorts of things going on there. And so it's not surprising, just like with the QAnon thing, that this is sort of, there's all these people, the minute the government wants you to do something, then people kick back on it. But, there's more to life than what is in the US. This is the thing. Through American exceptionalism, a lot of people don't even bother to look outside what's happening outside in other countries. If they look at how Australia has handled this up until recent times, it's been pretty good. We locked down pretty quickly. It wasn't the Prime Minister that really did that. It was the states. The Prime Minister is useless. He also under-ordered by far any vaccines for this country, and that's why now we have this terrible breakout in New South Wales, which is almost looking like it could get completely out of control, and it's spreading around. And that's because of the Prime Minister, who is a neoconservative evangelical Christian, the Pentecostal Christian. He just thinks that, it's God's will, I think. That's underneath it all. He's just a complete right-wing authoritarian wannabe. And that's why we now have the situation we have now. It's kind of a bit of a mess. But in the beginning, the lockdowns were actually working. And if he'd actually gotten if he wasn't the sort of Prime Minister he was, most of us would have been vaccinated and would have been way better. But the thing is, my point is that generally speaking, Australians aren't so reactive to things, and we're not that. It's not like we trust everything that's told us, but there's a certain amount of civility in things that you can kind of. It's not like capitalism has gone completely insane as it has in the US. It's going that way, but it hasn't quite gotten there, and so we have some level of trust in different sort of different organizations, etc. And I have a certain level of trust in science. I don't like Big Pharma because I know they'll make a buck whichever way they can, and they'd be quite happy if COVID goes on forever. But I do have a certain amount of trust, in science, and as long as that is being told to us in any real way, then I have a certain level of trust in these vaccines, and they obviously are working because they're keeping people out of ICU. So that's evidence right there. And COVID is an awful disease. It is not just the flu. It is an awful disease where you can be riddled with clotting problems, and it can cause all sorts of kidney failure, strokes, all sorts of things. It's nothing to muck about with. I can understand the whole concern about the vaccine passports that is in the United States. I don't believe that vaccines should be made mandatory. I believe they should be encouraged with, I don't believe in the stick thing. Carrots are way better. Incentives for people to get vaccinated, even offering money, but the US would never do that. They never offer money. There are other countries, even here, they talked about offering money to people who were hesitant. So I'm not some gullible person. Just because I decided to take that vaccine myself, it doesn't mean I don't have my own concerns about, say, long-term things about the vaccine. I also have concerns about, though, COVID variants just going berserk because they find ways naturally to mutate. It's not the vaccine that's causing the mutation. It's a natural thing in viruses, but also because people won't get vaccinated. And then there's variants come up there as well, because they're a host just waiting to be infected. They take on different ways of manifesting in different countries. Look at, where the Delta variant came from in India. That's no surprise. They've got a right-wing fascist government there too, and it's like it doesn't help to have those kinds of governments, and there's plenty of that now. It's a difficult one, and it's a nuanced sort of a thing. But I do kind of feel like the folks that are the ones that I've seen that aren't just completely wackadoo, that just if if you said the moon is blue, if you said the moon is white, they'd say no, it's blue or something. Not those kind of people, but intelligent people. I feel like, where were they like a year ago? Why is it now such a problem for them? Why now have, like, for example, Max Blumenthal abandoning all his journalist skills and just picking on anything he can to try and sow distrust in mask wearing and vaccines, and even in COVID. Like, I feel like he doesn't even, I'm not even sure if he even sort of thinks COVID is, he'll keep saying, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and yada yada, but I think he's just saying that so that people won't haul him up about it.
We have to be like, COVID is real and it's potentially lethal. Like, we have to say that, or else we'll get called like anti-vaxxer Holocaust deniers or something. Yeah. But so
he's just saying it. I don't believe that he's not an anti-vaxxer. I'm sorry, because everything he's putting out there is so poorly researched and fear-mongering and just contributing. And I feel like that ends up being a really fucking racist thing to do. I'm sorry, as I've outlined about black people in the United States. To do that is a really problematic thing to do. And yes, you can have concerns about menstrual disruption, and it's temporary. It appears it's temporary, right? But if it's temporary, then that's great, right? It's not a permanent thing. But then I heard somebody, I'm worried about my partner's reproductive, system. I'm worried that, it might cause infertility or something down the track. Well, this is the thing, like, you have to weigh up these things. But I mean, that's coming from things like Max Blumenthal's thing about I asked him, I said, are you talking about this because of Max Blumenthal's unfortunate reporting about menstrual disruption? And he didn't answer that. See, that's where it starts to become, you sow these things and people don't look into it because they've already got this confirmation bias about it, and then they put it out, and then they accuse you of being a shithouse leftist that doesn't care about people's concerns, that you're just all on board with it, which I got accused of today by this particular person. I mean, like, seriously and truly, I'm astonished and kind of appalled at how wackadoo this has gotten. Like, it's like, it's like, it just seems like anything in the US, anything the government says, it's like, doesn't matter if there's a kernel of truth in it, you just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Or it doesn't matter if it's nuanced, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, I don't blame people not trusting that government, but geez Louise, there are some things that are obviously actually helping and are saving hundreds of, or possibly millions of lives. And by the way, the Global South doesn't have this kind of problem. They just can't get vaccines, period, even though they want them. So that's something we need to think about when we start selectively picking issues like menstrual disruption and inferring like there's going to be some sort of long-term infertility. Next thing I expect people are going to say this is a eugenics program. I'm waiting for that. I don't know if Max Blumenthal will come out with something like that, but I'm waiting for someone to start going off on that and saying it's a eugenics program and they're trying to knock off black people and poor people and whatever, or depopulate. But I mean, the thing is that it actually all evidence appears to keep people out of ICU and keep them from getting severe disease and keeps people from dying by the hundreds of thousands. And the Global South doesn't have the luxury of saying, I don't want to wear a mask and I don't want the vaccine. They don't have that luxury.